The story of Brooklyn Ellis, as depicted in the YouTube video transcript, starkly illustrates the entrenched systemic racism and institutional silence that pervade American society, resonating with audiences familiar with the nation's ongoing racial struggles. Brooklyn, a black FBI agent, faces public humiliation at Martin's Grill in Hillsford when Officer Travis Holman targets her for a baseless, suspicious person check, simply because she is the only black woman in the diner. This incident, set against the backdrop of a seemingly ordinary lunch break, exposes a deeper, generational system of oppression within the Hillsford Police Department. Travis, a third-generation officer, leverages his inherited privilege to intimidate black individuals, a practice enabled by a system that consistently dismisses complaints against him as insufficient evidence. This narrative reflects the broader reality for black Americans, where existing in public spaces often invites unwarranted scrutiny, a struggle amplified by events like the 2020 racial justice protests following George Floyd's death. Brooklyn's investigation uncovers a chilling pattern of systemic racism. Travis uses unauthorized access to personal data, credit histories, medical records, and family details to target influential black community members such as Malik James, a promising young man driven to despair by constant harassment. Malik's story, ending in tragedy, underscores the psychological toll of such systemic targeting, where black individuals are forced to prove their worth daily. The transcript reveals that Travis's actions are not isolated, but part of a legacy, with his father, Earl, and grandfather, George, having served in the same department. Their own complaints of excessive force against black civilians similarly dismissed decades earlier. This generational continuity highlights how racism is woven into institutional fabric, where the Holman family's legacy is protected by a system that values white authority over justice, a reality that mirrors national issues of police impunity. The institutional silence Brooklyn encounters is equally damning. Despite her evidence, data logs, victim testimonies, and recordings, the FBI and Hillsford PD leadership refuse to act, citing political costs and disruption to partnerships with state police. This refusal to acknowledge Travis's misconduct, even when presented with clear proof, reflects a systemic failure where complaints from black individuals are buried under bureaucratic excuses. Brooklyn's suspension and the deepfake smear campaign against her further illustrate how the system protects its own, silencing those who challenge its norms. For American audiences, this story is a stark reminder of the resilience required to confront racism embedded in everyday life. Brooklyn's experience, while personal, speaks to a universal struggle: the fight to be seen as equal in a society where institutional silence perpetuates racial inequity, demanding collective action to dismantle these enduring injustices. The narrative of Brooklyn Ellis, as presented in the YouTube video transcript, exposes a chilling abuse of power and systematic surveillance that underscores a critical issue in American law enforcement, resonating with audiences attuned to the nation's struggles with institutional overreach. Brooklyn, a black FBI agent, uncovers Officer Travis Holman's calculated strategy to control and silence influential black community members in Hillsford through unauthorized data access, a tactic enabled by a complicit system. This abuse of power, rooted in racial bias, is not a mere lapse, but a deliberate effort to maintain dominance, reflecting broader American concerns about privacy violations and the weaponization of authority against marginalized groups. Travis's actions, supported by a legacy of unchecked privilege, reveal how law enforcement can exploit systemic tools to suppress dissent, a reality that echoes national debates over police accountability and data security in cases like those of Edward Snowden's NSA revelations. Travis's abuse of power begins with his public humiliation of Brooklyn at Martin's Grill, where he demands her ID without cause, a move steeped in racial profiling. However, Brooklyn's investigation reveals a far more insidious operation. Travis has accessed personal records, credit histories, medical data, family details, and even schedules of over 20 black leaders in Hillsford over 2 years. The transcript details how he exploited community programs, such as a police-sponsored youth initiative, to collect sensitive information under the guise of safety. This data, including Jamal Cross's private routines and family connections, allowed Travis to intimidate without physical violence, ensuring compliance through fear. Victims like Marcus Bellamy faced baseless audits, while Regina Matthews endured administrative checks, all designed to erode their influence without overt confrontation. This mirrors American concerns about surveillance, where law enforcement often uses digital tools to target communities of color, as seen in historical programs like COINTELPRO, which monitored civil rights leaders under the pretext of national security. The system's complicity in Travis's actions amplifies the abuse. His access to federal health and financial records, which required elevated permissions, suggests either negligence or deliberate enablement by higher-ups. The transcript reveals a standards advisory committee within the Hillsford PD, a group that shielded officers by reducing liability for complaints from minority communities. Travis's name appeared in their minutes, marked as stable, indicating his role as a reliable enforcer of this oppressive system. This institutional protection allowed him to operate with impunity as complaints against him, 5 and 9 years, mostly from people of color, were dismissed as insufficient evidence. Such systemic silence reflects a national pattern where police accountability is undermined by internal mechanisms, leaving Black individuals vulnerable to unchecked power, a reality that resonates with cases like Breonna Taylor's, where institutional failures enabled deadly overreach. Brooklyn's findings expose the psychological toll of this surveillance. Malik James, a young Black man, was driven to despair by constant harassment, his voice captured in a recording. "I don't feel like a person anymore, Mom." Travis's tactics, knowing intimate details like Jamal's Tuesday routines or Regina's family ties, created a pervasive sense of being watched, forcing victims to retreat from public life. For American audiences, this narrative highlights the urgent need for transparency and oversight in law enforcement data practices. Brooklyn's fight, culminating in the exposure of Travis's recorded confession, shows that such abuses can be challenged through collective action and truth. Her story underscores a broader call to dismantle systems that weaponize surveillance against communities of color, ensuring that no one can hide behind a badge to perpetuate silent control. The story of Brooklyn Ellis, as presented in the YouTube video transcript, is a compelling testament to resilience and defiance against systemic injustice, striking a deep chord with American audiences who admire steadfast courage in the face of adversity. Brooklyn, a Black FBI agent, experiences a humiliating encounter with Officer Travis Holman at Martin's Grill in Hillsford, where she is targeted solely for her race. This incident, while deeply personal, becomes a catalyst for Brooklyn to confront a broader, generational system of oppression within the Hillsford Police Department. Her unwavering resolve, even after being suspended and smeared with a deepfake video, transforms her personal ordeal into a powerful fight against systemic corruption, echoing the grit of American civil rights heroes like Fannie Lou Hamer, who faced brutal opposition yet persisted in their pursuit of justice. Brooklyn's journey, fueled by the tragic story of Malik James, showcases a resilience that not only withstands institutional betrayal, but also ignites a movement for change, inspiring viewers to challenge the systems that perpetuate racial inequity. Brooklyn's resilience is evident from the outset of her confrontation with Travis. Despite the public humiliation, being demanded to show her ID and threatened with detention for no reason, she maintains a calm, controlled demeanor, refusing to give Travis the reaction he seeks. Her measured response, "You have no idea who you're dealing with," is not an outburst of anger, but a declaration of her inner strength, honed through years of navigating a system that constantly questions her legitimacy as a Black woman in the FBI. This moment, set against the backdrop of a quiet diner turned tense, reflects the kind of disciplined defiance that Americans admire, reminiscent of Rosa Parks' quiet refusal to give up her seat, which sparked a revolution. Brooklyn's ability to remain composed under pressure, even as bystanders avert their eyes, underscores her understanding of the stakes. For Black individuals, any reaction can be weaponized as uncooperative, a label that often leads to escalation. Her resilience is not just in enduring the moment, but in channeling it into a broader mission, one that refuses to let such injustices remain unchallenged. The tragic story of Malik James, a young Black man driven to despair by relentless harassment, becomes the emotional cornerstone of Brooklyn's defiance. Malik's recorded words, "I don't feel like a person anymore, Mom," reveal the psychological toll of systemic racism, where constant surveillance and baseless stops eroded his sense of self. Brooklyn, hearing this from Malik's mother, Lorraine, feels a visceral connection to his pain, recognizing it as a pattern she has seen in countless case files. This moment galvanizes her, shifting her fight from a personal grievance to a systemic crusade. Despite her suspension from the FBI, orchestrated through a deepfake video meant to discredit her, Brooklyn persists, digging into Travis's unauthorized data accesses and uncovering a network of corruption that spans generations. Her defiance is strategic, not impulsive. She compiles evidence, access logs, recordings, and testimonies, knowing the system will resist her at every turn. This mirrors the American ethos of perseverance, where individuals like Martin Luther King Jr. faced institutional backlash, yet continued to push for justice through meticulous organizing and unyielding commitment. Brooklyn's resilience is further tested when the FBI, her own institution, refuses to act on her evidence, citing political costs and disruption to partnerships with state police. The betrayal stings, but it doesn't break her. Instead, she pivots, turning to the Hillsford community to amplify silenced voices, a move that showcases her defiance against a system that thrives on isolation. At a community meeting, she plays Travis's recorded confession, sparking a collective stand that strips him of his power. Her founding of Echo Justice, a nonprofit that empowers communities through legal support and Know Your Rights workshops, cements her legacy as a beacon of defiance, ensuring that the fight against injustice continues beyond her personal battle. For American audiences, Brooklyn's story is a rallying cry. Resilience is not just survival, but the refusal to let systems define one's worth. Her journey from a diner table to a movement leader inspires viewers to confront their own challenges with unwavering resolve, proving that even in the face of systemic betrayal, one person's defiance can reshape the future. The narrative of Brooklyn Ellis, as detailed in the YouTube video transcript, powerfully underscores the role of community empowerment and collective memory in dismantling systemic oppression, a theme that resonates deeply with American audiences who value the transformative power of unity. Brooklyn, a Black FBI agent, transforms her personal humiliation at the hands of Officer Travis Holman into a broader fight against a corrupt system in Hillsford that targets Black leaders through surveillance and intimidation. Her pivotal moment comes at a community center meeting where she mobilizes silenced voices to confront Travis, using his recorded confession to spark a unified stand that strips him of his authority. This collective action, rooted in the community's shared experiences, not only forces accountability, but also fosters a lasting movement through Brooklyn's founding of Echo Justice, reflecting America's rich history of grassroots activism, from the civil rights movement to modern-day campaigns for racial justice. The turning point in Brooklyn's story occurs at the Hillsford Community Center, a place historically marked by silence and submission. Initially, residents like Regina Matthews, Marcus Bellamy, and Jamal Cross are hesitant, their voices stifled by years of fear of audits, baseless stops, and the quiet erosion of their dignity. Brooklyn, understanding this hesitation, doesn't push but creates a space for them to speak, drawing on the American tradition of town halls where communities gather to address shared grievances. As the meeting unfolds, an elderly man shares how his daughter stopped driving at night after a baseless stop, followed by a woman who lost her job after an audit triggered by Travis. The transcript captures the room's shift. Suspicion gives way to clarity, isolation to recognition. When Brooklyn plays Travis's recorded confession, obtained through Dean Ryland, revealing his strategy to nudge outspoken figures, the community rises. Regina stands first, her gaze ablade. Marcus and others follow, forming a quiet wall of witnesses. This moment, where silence becomes a weapon, mirrors iconic American protests like the Greensboro sit-ins, where dignified unity challenged systemic racism without violence, inspiring viewers to see the power in collective action. The community's empowerment is amplified by their use of technology, a distinctly modern American phenomenon. As Travis's smirk fades under the weight of their stares, Residents pull out phones, recording and sharing the confrontation. Within minutes, the audio spreads. Regina forwards it to neighborhood networks, Jamal to civil rights groups, reaching teachers, pastors, and organizers. By the 30th minute, it's everywhere, a viral wave that echoes the 2020 George Floyd protests, where citizen footage ignited global outrage. This digital amplification transforms Hillsford from a corner of silence to a starting point for justice, showing how collective memory, preserved through shared testimonies, can break cycles of oppression. The transcript highlights how this unity forces accountability. Travis is suspended, his supervisor investigated, and internal records reopened, proving that when communities speak as one, even entrenched systems must respond. For Americans, this reflects the power of grassroots movements, where ordinary people, armed with truth and technology, can challenge institutional power, much like the Montgomery bus boycott united a city to end segregation. Brooklyn's establishment of Echo Justice cements this empowerment, ensuring the community's collective memory endures as a tool for change. The nonprofit offers legal support, know your rights workshops, and testimony nights, empowering residents to navigate and resist systemic oppression. The transcript notes tangible reforms in Hillsford. A controversial checkpoint is dismantled, and schools introduce civics classes on legal rights during police stops, led by Echo Justice. A teen at a bus stop taught to record, stay silent, then call Echo, embodies this legacy, showing how Brooklyn's efforts ripple outward, equipping future generations with tools to resist. This resonates with American values of self-reliance and community support, seen in initiatives like the Black Panther Party's free breakfast programs, which empowered neighborhoods while challenging systemic neglect. Brooklyn's story inspires viewers to harness their own collective memory, proving that when a community remembers its shared pain and stands together, it can force justice to echo louder than silence ever could, reshaping a town and a nation, one voice at a time. The narrative of Brooklyn Ellis, as depicted in the YouTube video transcript, powerfully illustrates the journey toward accountability and the transformative impact of grassroots justice, offering a hopeful yet realistic perspective for American audiences seeking systemic change. Brooklyn, a Black FBI agent, exposes Officer Travis Holman's systemic targeting of Black community members in Hillsford, a revelation that leads to his suspension and broader investigations into institutional corruption. Her establishment of Echo Justice, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering communities through legal support and advocacy, ensures that the fight for justice continues beyond institutional channels, fostering lasting reforms in Hillsford. This story resonates with Americans, reflecting the nation's ongoing struggle to align its ideals of justice with the reality of systemic failures, while emphasizing that true change often emerges from community-driven efforts rather than institutional promises alone. Travis Holman's downfall marks a significant moment of accountability, a rare victory in a system often protective of its own. Brooklyn's meticulous evidence, access logs, victim testimonies, and a recorded confession from Travis admitting to targeting outspoken Black leaders, ignites a firestorm of public and institutional pressure. The transcript details how the community center meeting, where residents confront Travis with his own words, catalyzes his suspension within 48 hours. His badge and weapon are surrendered at the Hillsford field office, a quiet but seismic shift that echoes national calls for police accountability, as seen in the aftermath of cases like George Floyd's, where public outcry forced action. The investigation doesn't stop at Travis. His supervisor is suspended for enabling procedural violations, and internal records are reopened, revealing a standards advisory committee that shielded officers by minimizing complaints from minority communities. This exposure of systemic complicity underscores the need for transparency, resonating with American demands for independent oversight and body cam reforms to curb institutional abuses. Brooklyn's founding of Echo Justice ensures that this accountability translates into grassroots justice, creating a sustainable framework for change. The nonprofit becomes a beacon for Hillsford, offering legal support, know your rights workshops, and testimony nights that empower residents to navigate and resist systemic oppression. The transcript highlights tangible reforms. A controversial checkpoint on the east side is dismantled after community petitions, and local high schools introduce civics classes on legal rights during police stops, led by Echo Justice. These changes reflect American aspirations for a justice system that serves all, echoing grassroots initiatives like the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which pushed for civil rights through community organizing. Brooklyn's rejection of a cushy FBI transfer to focus on Echo Justice embodies the American spirit of forging justice through action, not titles, showing that true reform often comes from outside institutions, driven by those most affected by injustice. For American audiences, Brooklyn's story offers a cautiously optimistic lesson. While systemic racism and corruption persist, determined communities can force accountability through collective action. The reforms in Hillsford, though incremental, demonstrate that change is possible when evidence and public will align, as seen in a teen at a bus stop who knows to record, stay silent, then call Echo. This narrative underscores the need for sustained grassroots efforts, petitions, workshops, and community testimony to ensure justice isn't a one-time victory, but a lasting shift. In a nation wrestling with its history of racial inequity, Brooklyn's fight shows that justice, though hard-won, can reshape systems when communities refuse to be silenced, inspiring viewers to engage in their own battles to ensure no one faces such injustice unchecked, and that grassroots justice becomes a reality forged through relentless pursuit of truth.